Have you ever had an idea for a video game you want to see come to life? This week on the Gift of Gaming podcast, I sit down with the podcast creator Darren Wade to pick his brain on a game he would love to see made into a reality. The Gift of Gaming podcast is back with another episode of Game Dreamer. Welcome back to the Gift of Gaming podcast, Game Dreamer edition. I'm your guest host today, Mr. Xbox. I almost forgot my moniker. Mr. Xbox Game Pass himself.
Nice. You've never had to introduce yourself, Luke?
I haven't, no. My name is Luke Maycock. And I'm sitting down today with that familiar voice you hear is obviously our regular host, Darren Wade. How are you getting on, Darren?
I'm good. I just realized there, and we were chatting about it, you were like, do you have a moniker for the podcast? And I was like, no, I feel like that would be a bit big-headed of me to introduce myself.
Darren, the creator of all.
Yeah. Darren God Wade, if you don't mind. Yeah.
But how are you keeping, Darren? How are you getting on?
Good. It's funny. It's nice to be on the other side. I've never been on the other side because I think you hosted a Game Dreamer episode last year.
I did.
And there was Colin and Craig were on that episode.
Colin and Craig, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I just sat outside making sure that everything
that
was
it didn't
working.
go on fire.
Yeah. So I've never been in the podcast on an episode where I didn't host. I think Colin has led one or two game reviews. I think that I was on as well. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say he was like true. I think I still did the introduction and things like that. Yeah. True host. So this is my first. That's the first time I've been on an episode and not done an introduction. Luke.
Yeah, very good. No, that's exciting. I love that. Tell me, before we get into the Game Dreamer stuff, I want to hear, it's been a while since we've actually just chatted in real life.
Yeah.
What kind of games are you playing? I have a guess, but tell me what kind of games you're playing.
I am only playing one game at the moment, Luke. I am 80-ish hours into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And I'm probably about 3/4 of the way through the game. The game's massive. The game is fucking huge, and it's funny. I was kind of like, it's been really enjoyable in terms of it goes through these great phases of open world side questing, enjoy yourself kind of bits to real dramatic, cool story beats, and I would say compared to the OG Final Fantasy VII, I would say 9 out of 10 of those beats, they've hit the nail on the head perfectly. And there's been one or two moments where I've been like, I don't know if that was a good creative choice that you made there based on what I think of the OG.
Yeah, you would have maybe done it yourself.
But, oh man, the game it's the first time in a long time I played a video game and sat down by myself and laughed at how enjoyable what was unfolding in front of me was.
That's great.
It's the first time I played a game where in work I'm itching, like literally itching to finish work to go sit down and actually continue playing.
Yeah.
And it's the first game in a long time where I'm doing the 100% kind of as I go because it's so enjoyable. Like none of it is, like 80 hours in, still no burnout really at all. Like loving, like everything is, all the mini games, all the side quests, all the battle stuff, so entertaining. But it's the first game in a long time as well where I'm like, I'm doing this because I'm enjoying it. But while I'm doing that, there's always a part of me that's pulling me towards I need to know what happens here in a big, big way. Like, so it's fantastic. I would say, Remake, the first part of the trilogy, was a huge game for me and probably up there as my second favorite game, like behind Kingdom Hearts 2. This game, and I don't know now until I finish it before I make a big decision, but it's in the top 3 for sure, possibly number 1. Do you know what I mean? Ahead of Kingdom Hearts 2, which no game has come close to beating Kingdom Hearts 2 for me. So 80 hours of my life since that came out have been pumped into this, and no burnout. It's just phenomenally enjoyable. Can't get enough of it.
That's beautiful. That's really nice to hear. I've heard kind of, because there's a few of our friend group that are kind of playing through it at the moment. I would imagine that if I was playing it, I would have that temptation to find out what happens in the story and how they do in the next part. That would probably overwhelm me. I wouldn't be 100%ing everything, but are you 100%ing as you go through the game?
Yes, I am, in the sense where, and I think what's been great is that I platinumed Remake just before Christmas. Oh yeah. So I'm still in the zone, like in terms of like when I got into it, it was just like riding a bike. I knew, and then I had all these extra bits to introduce. So I felt like I wanted to, because I'm looking to platinum that game, of course. I'm really excited about the hard mode because, 7 Remake comes to life when you get to play the hard mode version of the game. Like it's kind of the combat and the materia and how everything works in that game is kind of built around the hard mode.
Okay,
like
so it's a lot tighter as...
It's just, I think it's... I love playing through this game at the minute, but a lot of it is... I wouldn't say overly easy, but I'm kind of just going through it. There's very little risk, whereas the hard mode was a real in Remake, the first part, was a real joy, like a real, and it got me to fall in love with trying games on hard mode. Like I went into Horizon on hard mode. I started a Kingdom Hearts 1 playthrough. Now, that died a death the moment Rebirth came out, but I was playing through a Kingdom Hearts 1 playthrough on proud mode or critical mode, whatever it was, which I'd never done before. But it gave me an appreciation for game difficulty, which I never really had. Like Kev would often talk about playing games on hard mode. He'd start games in hard mode. Chris as well, I think, would always try and play games, and I never really got that until I kind of platinumed Remake and was like, damn, that's how, not necessarily how a game should be played, but there's so much more enjoyment and thought. Instead of just sitting there and just going through the motions, you're really kind of,
you're really pushing yourself up against the game design itself, like how, like it's really, like you said, like a lot of the times the game is really tuned around that hard mode experience, and that's why people go nuts for like the Souls like games.
Yes, and I understand that a little bit more now
than
I did before.
Baby you, and you really have to engage with the gameplay. You can't like half like anticipate or like half arse how heavily you go into it. You have to like really contend with the game as a medium,
and it's what's been so enjoyable about my playthrough currently, which is why I'm 100%ing it, because I'm making sure I get all the items, the weapons, the materia, and leveling things up in, like, that's what I mean. It's all a warm-up essentially, this playthrough for me, going back to it on hard mode, because I'm leveling up the things I want to level up in preparation, because when you start the hard mode you still have all the stuff that you got from your normal playthrough, but you'll need it in terms, and you'll need to level it up further to get through the hard mode. So it's all been in anticipation of the hard mode, which has made it enjoyable in itself. It's like a big planning thing for, like, you know, the marathon we run. Like this playthrough is my half marathon, my triathlon, my little mini triathlon, all for the true marathon that will be Rebirth on hard mode, that I'm very much looking forward to.
Beat normal mode at like 110 or 120 hours, and then hard mode starts.
But I think hard mode won't be a thing that I'll get into in the same way that I've gotten into this playthrough, in terms of, I think it'll be a thing that I'll dip into quite regularly. It's a very enjoyable game, and I much like Remake, I'm sure that things will be a little bit different in hard mode. Like there'll be a different flavor to it. But yeah, it'll be I'll step back from Rebirth for sure. I mean, Dragon's Dogma 2 is on the horizon, something I'm kind of keen on. And there's a couple of games I kind of want to go back to. Ghost of Tsushima was one I never really got into in a big way. So yeah, I'll get into hard mode, but it'll be a nice thing that I'll just kind of just tap away at when I have a bit of time of an evening and say, game's amazing, man. Game's
lovely,
amazing.
Beautiful. I love that. I love picking your brain about how into 7 you are, because it teases very nicely up for the topic today, which I believe you've come prepared with a bit of homework, a game that you thought up once upon a time and would love to see made into a reality.
Yeah, and it was kind of last minute. Andrew was meant to be on this episode. Unfortunately, he had to work overtime today, and I was going to leave you guys to it, but I've hopped on and I've kind of scribbled a few notes. But it's been this game idea that I have has always been on my mind. You know, I've bought a course in Unity that I kind of go to every now and then when I'm just kind of like learning. And one of the things I'd like to do is to try and make some semblance of a game. Loving it as much as I do, I'd like to understand the process a bit better. Like, it's great talking to Chris and to you, who do a bit of coding and stuff like that, and that's Chris's career. Do you know what I mean? He's a coder, so it's interesting to get, you guys have a better insight into certain things about video games than I ever do in terms of what goes into it. And I was like, I'd like to do this. And anytime I go into this course, this game that I'll talk about, it's always been this is the one I'd like to design.
Cool.
At an overview, I recently did an episode. Anybody who listens to the podcast, I did an episode by myself where I did a review on the Pixel remaster of Final Fantasy 1.
I did actually listen to that. That was a great episode.
Thank you. Yeah, I was chatting absolute bullshit for about 45 minutes, but we got through it. But I those games, the kind of mid to late 90s top-down JRPGs are my bread and butter. I love them. I adore them. And for my own game, it would definitely be a top-down JRPG pixel style game, kind of in the old style.
But we're talking like Final Fantasy 6 kind of
exactly,
style?
Yeah. And I think I'd like to do a modern version of it, and I guess the closest thing that's come out very recently, which is a joy for me to see, but unfortunately the game didn't land for me, was Sea of Swords,
Sea of Stars,
which looked phenomenal, and I was really excited to play it, but was quite disappointed by the game overall. It got quite stagnant quite quickly, and I think in a modern day, a game like that, I've said it so many times in the podcast, I'm all about narrative, and I think that game just had a very, it's been done. It's kind of, the narrative isn't really the the piece. It's the animation was the piece,
Okay,
and the
right, yeah.
artwork was the piece. And don't get me wrong, it was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
But it'd be a modern spin animation wise on a top down pixel JRPG, and it would be, my focus on it would be the job system.
Okay.
Job system in those JRPGs was something that I always loved. Going back to, let's say, the classics like Final Fantasy 1, you had like your red mage, your monk, your white mage, your sword master.
Let's get a little bit into like putting details on the ground. So yeah, red mage and monk, your white mage, black mage, stuff like that. Job systems in those JRPGs are sometimes quite mutable. Like you can either, sometimes the games start and there's a specific character that is always the thief. There's a specific character that is always the black mage. There's a specific character that always the white mage. That each informs how they behave in combat.
Yeah.
Does it inform much else beyond that throughout the game?
No, I mean, in those old ones, no. Like it wouldn't have told much for the story, which is where my game would differ, because I think the reason I would do this is that, like, job systems, as you said, it was purely for combat, and there was nothing else to it. But I think the focus for me would be the job system and developing the jobs that you choose for your characters. So ideally, it would be you want to make a strong game, you want to make strong characters. I wouldn't be going for a massive team group of people that you play as through this game. So, like, I looked at Final Fantasy 2 or 3. I always forget which one it is. But had this massive cast. Final Fantasy 6 is a massive cast of all these characters that come and go, and some of them die and some of them live. But they're so short lived in the game that the impact of whether they live or die or the decisions that they're making is never huge. It's never like oh God, I'm gonna miss Barrock, who was doing, it never sat with me. So my thing with this one would be to make it a little bit more character focused, character driven. But the job system would be something that would be developed throughout the game, that you would pick certain jobs. So there wouldn't be, like, you're not talking Final Fantasy 10 Part 2, we had the dress sphere job system where there was a gazillion of them, and you get to pick and choose, and it's all, this would be, I'd kind of limit it to kind of 5 or 6 jobs, maybe throughout the game, 3 characters. But the focus would be on developing the job. So one of them that I had was kind of like a beast master, but this is essentially taking a kind of Pokemon style thing, that this beast master would have a companion, a familiar, a creature. And you could, like, as you went out throughout the game, one of the side quests or the things that you could do for the jobs would be to go out and find more creatures that you could take on, and each of them would have different abilities that would help you on your quest. So, like, and it'd be very Pokemon based. So you'd find your Lapras somewhere who could take you across the ocean. You'd find your Pidgeot who would help you fly. Do you know what I mean? And listen, I'm not saying I'm taking Pidgeot and Lapras. Copyright, no copyright intended. I'm just, as an example.
Pokemon companies listening.
Yeah. If they can't get Palworld, they ain't getting me. But that would be kind of so there'd be a real importance in kind of keeping up with the jobs, as opposed to, like you said, it's not just a thing where they come into battle and they've got different moves and that's it. The job is what makes the story, in a sense, or helps you progress.
Sounds like it informs the gameplay as well. So you're saying 3 characters. That was an interesting detail as well. 3, because you don't want the cast to be huge and sprawling with too many. Like, I get your point about, like, Bardock, you didn't invest emotionally in this character. You didn't even have the chance to invest emotionally in a character.
They come and go quite quick and stuff. And don't get me wrong, I think in 2 or 3, and I need to figure out which feckin' Final Fantasy it was, because it is one of my favorites in terms of, I love the introduction of these characters and what they did for the quick time they were in the story. Like, one of the characters came and stopped a boulder from trampling over the rest of the party, but he got crushed underneath it himself. And I was like, damn, you know what? Like, and it's nice flavor, but I want it to mean something. And I think what I look at, although the game wasn't perfect, in Final Fantasy 15, the development of those 4 characters on their journey meant that when you got to the end, and spoilers here if you haven't played Final Fantasy 15, I mean, real big spoilers, so, don't listen to the next, like, minute or 2 of this podcast if you want to play Final Fantasy 15. But your main character comes to the conclusion or the understanding that he has to sacrifice himself at the end. And the last conversation he has with the crew, and Kev will tell you, and the same thing happened to me, hugely emotional. Like, Kev cried. I got quite teary playing it. That it's a big moment that and that's what I want from a game. I want to feel. I mean, I want it to be enjoyable, of course, but from a story perspective, I want to feel something. So I think having great NPCs would be kind of where I'd be at. Like you'd meet really interesting characters, but for the journey itself, I would want, like, I mean, think of your Aang, Katara, Sokka. Like, there's only 3 or 4 people on this entire journey, and they get along. They don't get along. They help each other develop in certain ways. I'd be looking for a big kind of a big relationship piece between them, which I think is what those old style, with the exception of kind of Final Fantasy VI, which had a big story piece on it. The older ones just had these characters, and you went through, and there's the bad guy, stop the bad guy, and there was very little kind of in between for the most part. Final Fantasy V had a bit of intrigue with some of the characters, but for the most part, it wasn't front and center, and that's what I'd do differently, I think.
Okay, yeah, I really like the premise of this. I really like the direction you're leaning with it. From here, the questions that are coming to my mind are, I'm kind of drawn into how the job system could land and impact story wise. So can you remember, you don't have to be exact with the number, but you think around like 6 or 7 jobs, or 5 or 6?
6 or 7. So, and it's this is where it gets a bit complicated. I'm probably leaning in. I know when Craig, when he did this episode, he was a very kind of a broad look, and it wasn't too linear, too narrow. But I think I'm probably getting a bit too narrow maybe on this. But my idea would have been that, there is the Swordmaster job, and that would develop as you would go out through the world and meet sword masters around the world. Do you know what I mean? Blade masters. these guys who are, and there'd be a certain group, and there'd be an intrigue in what they do, and in order for that you develop that character, you'd have to go and try and meet these people or find these people, and you'd hear rumors of them throughout the world of where to find them, and you go train with them, and that would be the kind of quest there to develop that job. And then what I like about this idea was that's how you learn new abilities and things. And when it comes to the turn-based combat, because that's what I'd be going for. I'd be going for turn-based. I know it'll turn a lot of people off, but that's what I loved.
That. Yeah, I'm the exact same. I love time-based. I don't like it. It just adds an unnecessary level of stress for me.
but it's, I want it to be, and that's where I'll go with the next part, is why I wanted to change it up a little bit. Like, I played through Final Fantasy 1, and you sit in there, and like, listen, that's a fucking late 80s game. Don't get me wrong. It was limited by its time, of course, but I don't want it to be a game where you get into a fight, random encounters all the time, and it's just a hold down the X button until you tell everybody to attack, and it's dead, and you get your experience, and off you go. Yeah, I want it to be like a game of chess. Like, every time you get into a battle, it's going to be longer. It's going to be more difficult in terms of the every fight's a risk. There's a risk element for a game over type thing. It's not going to be you're simple. There's 5 goblins, 1 hit on each of those guys, and they're done. And I'd look at a Final Fantasy X aspect whereby what moves you did affect who would move next in the thing, and that's all how you would. So I'd have something similar to that, whereby you'd need to plan your moves, because you'd see these enemies doing something that are going to crit you, that it's going to make it real hard. So your plan in this is that, and it's a strategy, real strategy. How do I do this? Well, I'll get that person to cast haste, or I might send my Beastmaster person who's just caught this kind of like really cool, tough rock creature type thing to step out in front of everybody and take that hit. So I need to make sure my Beastmaster gets the next move before this gets that kind of really in-depth strategy, that the fights are longer, they're less frequent. Yeah. And it's kind of that anytime you get into one, it's a real thinker. It's not a just sit there and put on fast forward and just get your experience and go.
I really like that. I love the combat system from Final Fantasy X as well. Like, we know a lot of people who have problems with that turn-based system, and specifically 10's one. But I also loved it. I love that you could see the turn order for the next 7 turns or something, and if you cast haste on one character, you'd see them jump up the turn order. Yeah, that's cool. That's really that was always a very satisfying way to play out battles,
and it created a level of I suppose nervousness or tension for you, especially when it came to bosses, and you'd see your team is low on health, and you're like, Jesus, my white mage isn't going to get a turn for the next 3 or 4 moves, and I can see the big bad guy, evil boss dude's going to make a turn before my white mage gets the chance. This could be game over. What can I do to bump her up the list? And so it'd be kind of based on that. So kind of like a 4D chess type situation. Anytime you went into a battle, you really have to think. It's not just a case where get everybody to attack and attack and attack until the things are dead and get your experience and go. It's a real sitter and thinker, and there's a lot on the line, because I think, and not that I want it's going to be high fantasy narratively and everything. So it's not as if I want to have a form of realism, but I just kind of want to have a form of risk. Like, if you went into a fight and you had to fight some goblins, that's not going to be easy. Do you know what I mean? They could fuck you up, like, you know, at any point in time. So I think I look for a bit more realism. And again, that's what I mean about the job system being a bit more important in that, like, you need to go and develop these jobs in a way that when it gets to the later fights, that you have these options that will help you get through these fights, because certain things you're going to need when the things get tougher and all that kind of stuff. So the game itself, from a gameplay perspective, would focus hugely on the job system.
Okay, really like that. Question popped into my mind now is, how do you feel about a Fire Emblem style, I think Fire Emblem did this at one point, Fire Emblem style permadeath situation for your characters? Or will they be so narratively tied in with the story that there could be like planned deaths for specific
I think
classes?
If there was any deaths, permadeaths, it would be narratively driven as opposed to gameplay driven. And I think Fire Emblem can do that because of the cast of characters. Like Fire Emblem's got a huge amount of characters in there to choose from. And I remember playing those games, there was so many that if someone did get a permadeath, which is the way I played the game, and it was enjoyable, that, you know, and there was a couple of characters I really enjoyed that kicked the bucket when I played through those series, and I was like, oh. But it added a different, you know, spice to it. But again, it took me out of the narrative sometimes, because the character would have a permadeath and be gone from the story, but there'd be no acknowledgement that the character was dead, because that's just so much writing to put into the game to actually get characters and players to acknowledge that,
conditionally acknowledge it based on where you were in the story and stuff like that. I guess the model that was popping to mind wasn't exactly Fire Emblem. It was more like XCOM, where you like name your characters and you do give them a class and you develop them and level them up, but then when they die, there's like a funeral ceremony for them, pretty much, where they go to the like Hall of Honors or whatever, and then another, you can replace them with someone else.
And again, I think that works so well for games like XCOM, where you're like, I think you're kind of a commander, so all these people are kind of essentially grunts. Do you know what I mean? So if they all die, it's in a match, in a fight, it's game over. But for the story perspective, they're talking, you know, the game's talking to you to get you through. So I wouldn't include anything like that. And I'd have a rough storyline for the game, and the characters would be tied in intrinsically to it, so there wouldn't be a permadeath option. It'd be like someone faints, but, you know, the usual, you faint and you black out type of job Pokemon. Like, I mean, it wouldn't be as lighthearted as Pokemon, but in like most kind of JRPGs, you could give like life magic or a phoenix down, those kind of things to revive people in battle. That aspect would exist in it. There's no permadeath.
That's cool. Okay, I like that. I needed to figure that out. Another thing I'm really curious about is how you feel the job impact would affect the story. So what I'm kind of thinking about is, if there are 6 or 7 different jobs and there's 3 characters, you choose the job for each character early enough on in the story, I imagine. Are there kind of, I suppose there might be one main story arc, and you can step in at any point and correct me.
So there is one main story arc, I think. So, and this is probably where my 3 character thing should possibly be 4 potentially, but there would be one character. So the storyline at a very, you know, big overview, because I've thought about this for a long time if I was to make a game and this would be the narrative, is that it's in a world where magic was abundant and people could just pull it from the air, from the earth, and use it. But like, you know, 20, 30 years prior to this, there was a huge fight over like kind of big wells of magic, and these wells were like right on the border of 2 nations, and they went to fight, and they sent all of their mages to pull all this magic to go fight the front line, because these wells, because there's so much magic in them, the mages would be so much more powerful. They were all sent to the front line, and because there was such a pull, there was a massive, event that happened, and it shattered magic in the world, so that those who could feel magic, there's only a certain percentage of people who can be mages, they can feel magic, they have a sense for it, that the magic was gone, it left this world. So these people were left kind of, I think I titled them something like, voiceless or the shattered, that they essentially become broken people afterwards, because they can't feel it anymore, it's gone from them. And that there are now certain people who can pull together like elements of the magic around them. So like magic would have been just like a force, like breathing, but now there's certain people who have been born and now they're in their late teens, early 20s, who can sense fragments of it and pull those fragments together to create a spell.
Okay.
But the fragments would be based, like, and spells would be based on elements. And this is me getting into, like, fucking lore shit for this game. So this
it's cool. I think,
but these people would like
gameplay as well.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, and the mage would be someone who they'd pull all these things together to create a spell. But like for something like life, you need a lot of water and air type thing.
Okay.
So
yeah.
depending on where you are in the world, some of those things might not be so available to you.
Right.
So like if you're if you needed like you were completely at a landlocked area with no lakes or water supplies, no rivers or anything like that near you, the idea that there'd be lots of fragments of the water element around you, there wouldn't be as much. So those spells would come at a huge cost, or they'd be very limited. So depending on where you are, so the game would focus on, there would be a mage character who would kind of be the focus of it.
I was curious. This isn't something everyone can do. There's
one person on the team. And what I mean is they would be locked to being a mage, essentially. Their whole journey is to learn how to just do the magic, and maybe can they fix it? Ooh, who knows? But the other people would be their companions, and maybe having two people that you can interchange through the jobs wouldn't be an enjoyable thing. You'd probably want three to get like, so I can shop and change and I get to experience more of these job systems. But the whole idea would be that there would be this mage who is the kind of the protagonist, possibly, or maybe, but they'd go around and you're trying to figure out ways in which to see if this can be fixed. Do you know what I mean? If the magic can be pulled in the world. But depending on where you are in the world means that some spells would come at a huge cost or might not be available to you at all.
Okay. Yeah,
like if there's a part where you have to go into a volcano, water, air, completely limited. So your spells become more destructive, and the healing stuff is at a massive premium in situations like that. So that would also affect gameplay depending on where you are.
Story possibly, like that could, there could be implications.
Big moments. Got to save this person, but I can't pull any water or air. And they kick the bucket.
That could be character death right there. Yeah.
So narratively, it'd kind of be based off this character trying to discover a way to kind of fix this aspect. Now the world can still go on, but magic would have made people's lives very comfortable, and things now are, the world is still quite upset and everything like that. That they're still trying to make do with a world that has a crippled magic system, essentially.
I like that. And so the other characters, say if there is this core staple character of a mage, the other characters, say if there's 2 or 3 of them, they each pick their own class. I understand that they would have their own kind of quest lines. I really like that. Would that come with their own sort of storylines, a la Final Fantasy 15, the
those DLC things?
Yeah.
I mean, like ideally, yes, but I mean, like again, I try to think of the game in a way that if I had the skills, I could still develop it. And I think going to that thing whereby each of these individuals has their own storylines and things like that might be a bit tricky. The way I looked at it would be that the job systems would define the story, essentially. So if you picked a job for a character and you wanted to unlock that job, that would develop that character. So now what you'd be looking at then is that is it possible that maybe certain characters are locked into certain classes, that let's say one character who's quite a bit of a nature lover, maybe they're the only person who can be the Beastmaster / other kind of nature-esque type class. Maybe they're only interchangeable, those kind of jobs for that person. So if they're following any of those quest lines, it could be tailored towards their story, essentially.
Right, yeah.
But it'd be the job system or the classes available that would define kind of the side questing, the storyline for those individual characters.
Okay. I like how this is kind of coming together. And again, while we're on the podcast, while we're on Game Dreamer, there's no limitations. You don't have to.
That's true.
You can make it
so everyone's. I'm going to write stories for fucking everybody,
Yeah.
and they're going to be. Yeah. No, I mean, I'd of course, I'd love to, and that's what I mean. It needs to be a good narrative, and these kind of the people that would be with you. This mage would be kind of a young protege who is able to pull at these shattered remains of magic that exist, ethereally, and they're kind of a protege, so they're kind of sent off. There'd be a class of mages, that would send this person off to be like, you're our best hope to possibly find a way to solve this, and you'd be sent with a bodyguard who would be that swords person who would try to learn master the art of the sword, and then of course you'd come across other people who would be willing to help you. These other 2 characters in the classic, RPG fashion, build your team as you go type job, and
I love the idea as well, like the fact that like being a mage type in this world, like a post cataclysm kind of world, because it's so much more rare and promising and powerful, you're kind of, that character is so much more vulnerable in the world. Like they're so probably open to like being captured and turned into an empire or whatever to be like. So that's a real risk story wise, and you have to entreat possible characters that you discover as you're building your party, with whether they have your best interests in it, or why do they really want to team up with you,
and you're keeping this a secret as best you can, that this person can actually, because again, you know, that ability to be able to pull out what magic is left could be seen as currency, could be seen as pure power, you know, and the people who have control over those people would be the people who could essentially control, you know, how the world is working and operating and things like that. So yeah, it would be this character would be a big deal. And what I like about them as well is that depending on where they are in the world or what magic is available to, and that could also be like, especially story driven, you could go to areas in the world where they're just, for that individual who's pulling at these shattered remains of magic, there might just be so few in that area, like there's nothing to pull from. So all of a sudden your main character is super weak, is like really weak, can't do a whole lot, and you go to other places where they're just they're a fucking, you know, rocket launcher of a character all of a sudden, and that would be, you know, it could be as again like kind of story based, where they come in and they're able to save the day or not save the day depending on where they find themselves at that place and time. You know, it'd be a cool kind of risk factor that it's a thing that the player has no control over and just has to make the best strategy that they can. Because as well, like when you think about the fighting and how I want that to be a bit more of a 3D chess game, if you find yourself in a fight and all of a sudden your mage is, you know, you might get a notification at the beginning of the fight to be like, there's very little air here or whatever else, and you go then to your menu to see what magic spells use air, you realize that so many of them are limited now and might only be a one use or a no use, that kind of thing.
Like weaker versions of the spell,
exactly,
or something like that. I really like that. I did want to go back to the combat system as well. I was curious how you felt about random encounters. If you do want a kind of a more bespoke, like challenging, like each kind of encounter is a challenge, would you invite random encounters? Would you just, like, in this hypothetical world where you have infinite time, would you script like millions of different encounter types, or would you work on, you're at this part of the game, you have to walk up this path, you can try and avoid this character, but if you fight him...
It's funny, I like both systems that exist in the world of video games today. Do you know what I mean? A lot of people would hate on random encounters, and I can understand why. I was watching someone play through Final Fantasy 7 OG recently. You know, I was trying to get as much Final Fantasy 7 content as I could in the lead up to Rebirth. And they were playing through 7 with like another member of the team. I think it was PlayStation Access were doing it. And the guy playing it was like, I fucking hate these encounters. Whereas the guy who would, and he'd never played through 7 before, or like, you know, RPGs like that before. Whereas the guy that was sitting with him he was, you know, guiding him as a pro for Final Fantasy games, and he loves the random encounters, and I'd be the same. I've never found random encounters to be problematic. I understand how offensive they can be to people, or how much of a frustration they can be. I think I'd invite the random encounters aspect, but the frequency would be low, way lower than your normal RPG, because again, you're getting into a random encounter. It's not going to be a quick 1.5-minute, 2-minute fight where you whoop these things and they're gone. Every encounter is you got to sit down and think about this. Do you know what I mean? So they're longer, they're rarer, and there's a lot more risk involved. I think in every one that you get into would be how I would look at it.
I do like that. I think there was a Pokemon game at one point, I don't know which one, but it was when they started to kind of play around with the idea that you could see the Pokemon in the tall grass, and if you walked into them, that started that encounter. But I think there was a Pokemon game that had that, and it also had random encounters in the tall grass, like saying that there are Pokemon that could just jump out at you. That's a really, like, if that exists but is rare, that's a really powerful, like, scare tactic for the player.
Yeah,
if you're walking around on low health.
And if you just come up, you know, let's say one of your side quests to go and kill this thing, and you can see it, you know, floating around, you know, ready yourself, and you go and you find, you say, woohoo, I won, and in the, you know, in the joy of winning that fight, you just continue on with your quest, not thinking about it, and all of a sudden you're dragged into a random fight, and you haven't healed, and you haven't whatever else, so you're like, I got to sit down and really think about this. You know what I mean? And like, I'm playing through Rebirth at the minute, and there's so little risk involved, which is so enjoyable. Like, I mean, I finish a fight, or if I die in a fight, it'll just say restart from last battle. And I think I'd probably implement something like that. I wouldn't want it to be a case whereby if you died, it's back to the last time I saved, which could be fucking ages ago. Because I don't exactly. I don't want the game to be unenjoyable in that sense. I think I'd be like, okay, you lost, but we're gonna bring you right back to that fight if you want. And you can choose to, like, obviously heal up and stuff like that, but you're going to get right back into that fight, and it's still going to be that challenge. Do you know what I mean? Just because you've gotten the option to, like, heal yourself back up to full ability, and you go back in again, each of these things is still going to be a challenge throughout the whole game. And as you level up, things don't get easier. Do you know what I mean? I'd have it that, you know, dynamically wherever you are in the world, they're matching your level. So it never becomes a case where you go, because I wanted to feel like that's what I mean. I think there was the thing I would have gotten it from in terms of like this idea that you could fight 5 goblins and it could still be a massive risk was there's an anime that was Goblin Slayer, and I watched a couple of episodes of that. I never finished it, but I watched a couple of episodes of that, and I really found that quite intriguing, that there was this kind of really start off kind of party who were heading off into the world to make a life for themselves as mercenaries, and they came across a cave of goblins, and everybody in the world laughs, haha, goblins are so easy to...
Yeah.
But the goblins got the upper hand and just kind of slaughtered this party of this group. And I was like, but that's kind of... It's a bit more realistic. Do you know what I mean? They're monsters. They can be violent. They can be grim. And that's kind of what I'd want to put in, that any kind of encounter you have, there's a huge risk involved.
Yeah, it kind of grounds you in the world a bit more, and there's a sense of stakes. That's... No, I really like that. I actually saw... I never remember the name of this. I saw a similar anime. I've seen the start of Goblin Slayer. I'm pretty certain it's not Goblin Slayer, but there was another anime that did the same thing. I think it was like an isekai style anime, where it was a party of people, and they were going through a forest, and they came across a pack of goblins in the forest, and they started to fight them, and it was this really intense battle because they weren't very high leveled. And there was something really satisfying about that, like narratively, because you kind of think you love it. It kind of reverses the usual paradigm where you sort of put yourself in the shoes of the great hero who's able to do everything, is able to summon magic, able to like do all these incredible feats. But if you think about it, what you're actually like in real life and how scared you'd actually be in those situations.
Yeah, and
something about touching on that.
Yeah, and it's I would like it to be kind of not. I don't want it to be a thing where you just level up to level 99 and you're a god. Like, that's not what I want from the story. It's this thing of like, no, there's always risk, and these are always going to be a problem, and that each kind of fight you get into would, in terms of, it could be really easy. Like if you were, let's say, fighting a group of whatever, and you're close to a spring or whatever, so the remnants of magic here are really strong, and all of a sudden your mage is OP as fuck, and it can be an easy battle, but it'd be all based around the terrain that you're in, essentially. Like, you know, have you got good, you know, and I think I'd focus the terrain stuff mostly on the mage, their ability to draw magic. I think the rest of the jobs would be kind of, I don't want to make the game too confusing to be like, oh, you're in a tight space, so your sword master is at a disadvantage type. That I think wouldn't be overly fun. I think I'd base it around what the mage is able to do, so that if you have any easy fights, it's based off entirely the randomness of what kind of shattered magic is still left in that area of the world that your mage can draw from.
Lovely. I'm loving this. This is a great idea for a game. I always love when people try and do that kind of classic RPG and like flesh out the direction they would want to take it. Like Sea of Stars, you have a lot of respect for. Even like, I think Octopath Traveler isn't like held in super high regard.
It looks beautiful, but it lacks any kind of character. Like,
the kind of soul was the criticism was sort of missing from it. But I always do have like immense respect for people who, because you have to put a lot of respect on the genre to try that and to trifle with that, because it's been done really well so many times.
Yeah.
So it always shows a real love for the genre.
I think like Final Fantasy VI would possibly be the exception to the rule of narratively the top-down RPGs or JRPGs of a bygone time were narratively kind of empty. Well, not necessarily empty, but like there wasn't a whole lot to the classic story. There's a big bad evil guy. Your whole thing is leveling up yourself until you can go and fight him and defeat him and bring the crystals back to life. You know, that kind of there was a definite kind of tropes that existed, and I think the Sea of Stars was one that I was really hoping was kind of going to really hit towards, because like in terms of the imagery, the art style, everything like that was perfect. Like when this came out, I was like, that's, you know, I immediately thought of my game. I was like, that's how I'd want it to look, and the animation's so crisp. And their one isn't exactly turn-based; it's more of a freestyle kind of battle system. But I'd like that animation that they had in a turn-based style thing to make the fight seem real, kind of, you know, just stylistic, just cool. Do you know what I mean? The moves would look great and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was again another one of those that was narratively just very linear. I didn't care for the characters as I went on. I never finished it. I couldn't, and I think that's the thing when you go to a top-down JRPG, you're very limited in terms of gameplay. Yeah. So I think at my age, the narrative has to be hugely important, and I think that hasn't been the case for a lot of the old school JRPGs or the new attempts at them. I think narratively the new versions of those games that are coming out, they're focused more on to make it look modern, but it doesn't feel modern, doesn't play modern. It's just storylines can still be a little bit lacking. So yeah, the focus for me would definitely be on these characters, this team, and how they are as a relationships, and the big kind of story beats as you go through, and that would be the focus to pull people, because turn-based combat can be a bit dreary at times.
Yeah.
And I think I would, like I said, I'd like to bring the frequency of those down, the challenge of them up, to make it a bit more engaging. And the whole time, the reason you're doing this is because I want to know what happens to these people. I want to know what happens in this world.
Yeah, love that. So we have tight JRPG kind of storyline, very story-driven one, based around the class system. We have side quest lines that come off based on the class system that develop those or the characters. We're talking about a top-down kind of pixel arty style, like your Bravely Defaults or your...
Yeah, and like, I mean, geez, if you could make it look as... The artwork in Bravely Default was phenomenal in some places. If you could make it look like that, fucking absolutely go for it,
We're assuming infinite resources.
Yeah, okay. Well, then make it Bravely Default as the guy.
Yeah, perfect.
That's the art, the design I'd like,
That's cool. And I love the idea of like leaning on the combat system and leaning for like a sense of gravitas that you do usually lose a lot of gravitas by not having a consequence-heavy battle system, like we talked about at the very top of the podcast, talking about remake and the hard mode, and that if there is a gameplay element that you get pushed up against the limits of, it's just a more engaging experience. Like, it's just more fun. That's why Souls-like games are so popular, like we said. So love the focus on kind of a challenging combat system that you really have to think through. And then I guess like story is king above all else in this kind of game. Yeah. So you're talking about really leaning into it. Story wise, in terms of elements, and I guess we'll wrap up on the story part. But in terms of elements of the story, so you have your potentially mage kind of protagonist, main kind of protagonist. Are we talking? Is it going to be, I guess, like more of a Zelda type storyline where the whole quest is just one kind of long character arc for our hero that's just based around the world and whatever calamity is happening? Will there be elements? Would you consider sprinkling in elements of like a love story, a love subplot or something? Would you keep that away? Do you like that in your RPGs?
I think I don't mind that in my RPGs. I think I know what you're saying in terms of infinite resource. I mean, I've done a little bit of in my own time kind of writing on this story as not for a video game, but in terms of like there's some elements I took from our old D&D campaign that I used to write. That I was putting together for 3 years. Yeah. So for me, narratively, do I think I could write a good romance story? I don't know. It's not something I would say would be one of my strong points. I wouldn't rule it out though, because I think you read any kind of story and that adds a different element to it. I don't think I would like the focus entirely to be on this protagonist who is going to save the world or whatever, these are just tag-alongs. I think again I would base the other kind of story arcs entirely on those job systems. So that if you had one of those characters who was the beast master who was kind of collecting the Pokemon, if you will, that could had a couple of moves and you could bring them out to battle, and each one had their own different thing, but you're going to carry so much with you, so you decide to like lose some as you go or take some on, and they help you traverse some areas of the world as well. But there might be a big thing about like coming to learn how to be the best beast tamer that you can be. I want to be the very best.
Like no one ever else.
But I mean to say is that I would, and I mean that sounds very weak, and that's not what I'd be going for. But I'd lean into a bit more of a nature, the looking after of creatures, looking after what's left on the planet side of things. And again, I don't know what way I would do it. I don't know if I fleshed out that, but I would put a big story into each of the jobs that would be in it. The sword master could go on this quest to find, or the guy who has the sword goes on the quest to become the sword master, and there could be a huge in-depth kind of quest about meeting the sword masters of the world and what they've gone through and what they've been through and the cost of being the sword master. Again, the beast master, the looking after the creatures, and I mean, I don't know what other jobs or classes that I would put in. I'd like to have more, because I think is the games that I've played have been more entertaining the more of those that there is, but I would have them storyline focused. So I would have about 3 or 4 of the ones that you could maybe pick from, but each of them, if you wanted to, could follow a quest line in itself. And I think it would take from a little bit if I'm think of something that'd be a little bit similar, but I'd like it to be a bit more in depth than it was. But Final Fantasy 14, depending on the class or job that you picked, you'd go on quests to become the best barbarian type scenario. And again, they were good. Like, the game's great. Final Fantasy 14 is great, but again, they would have been a little bit more. You're just becoming the greatest barbarian, and this is how you do it. And it might have had funny little bits and pieces intertwined in between, but there wasn't, again, a huge amount of depth to some of those quests. So I think I'd be looking at making more in-depth kind of story to these jobs, and depending which character you have in which job, they get to experience that line, you know,
putting more narrative weight on those stories.
And I don't know if I'm doing that because I think that's an easier way to do it, as opposed to developing three or four very different individuals. Do I find it easier to maybe write stories around these jobs? Possibly. But yeah, I think the job system takes such focus that I think the pull for me, at least, and what I'd hope would be pulled for other people, would be the joy in maxing out this job or this class. Not only does that help in the turn-based strategy side of things, but it's also a huge pull on a narrative side. And the idea of maxing this out would be a really enjoyable, not necessarily critical or a thing that you have to do, but if you wanted to do it, it's a hugely enjoyable and rewarding piece to take on.
Yeah, there's a lot of payoff. I'm kind of thinking of, I don't want to get too heady here, but you know, the Joseph Campbell's monomyth, the hero's journey, where it's
the classics, the storytelling,
call to adventure and stuff like that, and the journey from the known into the unknown, and then get the sword and come back to the known. If everyone had that kind of satisfying story behind their job, behind their class or whatever, and their call to adventure was basically meeting this main character mage kid, and his own call to adventure and his own arc is the story of the game.
Yes, yeah.
But each one of those, their call to adventure is meeting this mage kid, and that is the impetus for them to go explore and refine their craft.
That they're only going to be able to help this kid achieve what the world needs by being the best at what they set out to be.
So you could potentially, there is a run of the game you could do where you don't follow any of those quests to completion. You just do the main storyline, but you'd more like be depriving yourself of a good time.
Potentially. And like, it's one of those things where if I was developing the game, it might come to me where I'm like, okay, the story's really lacking unless I make these things essential, that you have to do them. Do you know what I mean? That's part of the story as well. You know, like I said, the side quests that I'm playing through in Rebirth now are quite interesting, in that some of them are actually lending a little bit more love and attention to the main story in different ways. I don't need to do it at all, but it's been a real joy to do it. And that's what I'd like it to be, but potentially, maybe the main story that I have in this would suffer if these things weren't, you know, run through to completion for these other characters.
Awesome. Well, that's amazing.
There's my game, Luke.
I love it. You've really done your homework. That was a great little exploration. I love the idea of it, and I love tackling these things with the idea of like you've infinite budget and infinite time. And because I think if you artificially put those restraints in your way, like those restraints are going to come up just by trying to make these games.
Dream big, man, you know, and then
you really we'll
see what I'll create afterwards, you know.
let there be all kinds of scope creep.
Pong 2.0 is what it ends up being, because I've got no ability in reality, like.
Well, I did it. I made a text-based adventure game last month, and I had such great ambitions for what it was going to be, and then when it came up to like deadlines and stuff like that, I was like, I just kind of have to do this, and the story is awful. Like, it's so bad, but it's more about getting it done at a certain point. So that, like, if you put boots on the ground and start, like, if the rubber meets the road and you're like getting stuck into it and building this, you'll reach those natural limitations anyway. You'll have to get creative anyway. But in this space, in the game dreamer space, it can be anything you want. Imagine you've the most talented artists in the world, and like,
then the soundtrack will be done by Nobuo Uematsu.
Of course, the soundtrack is essential. Like, I didn't even want to go there. I just assumed Nobuo Uematsu, Yoko Shimomura.
Get them all in. Get them all in. A big a love affair of all these great
the greatest music composers for
video games. They're going to come in and do the soundtrack for this.
That's fantastic, Darren. This has been really, really lovely. I love the vision that you gave us for your game.
And it's nice to get it out there. Do you know what I mean? It's been fun to actually put it on the table and go through it, because it's been living in my head rent-free for a long time that I haven't really fleshed out in a way that I'm doing on this episode. So that was great. Thanks for having me do it, Luke.
Yeah, it's great. I don't want to make this the kind of impetus of Game Dreamer, but I think there would be a market for that game if you made it. I don't want to always go back to that at the end of a Game Dreamer episode, but I think it's like a...
Well, the last thing you want to do is get someone on a Game Dreamer episode and say, oh, you're right. Yeah,
exactly.
Fucking hockey shit, bud.
Well, Luke didn't say anything about whether it'd be good, because honestly, what the fuck do I know? But no, I think I'd definitely play an RPG like that. I think it's a beautiful idea. I'm really glad for you coming on the episode and sharing your idea with us.
And if I find out the next 2 or 3 years that a game very similar to this has come out, I'm coming after all the listeners.
And I made it. That's gonna be. I'm gonna have made everyone's idea with them knowing.
Yeah, sons of bitches.
Yeah, so no, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, audience, for joining us for this little journey on the Game Dreamer, where we got to explore Darren's RPG idea. Sounds beautiful. If you've got any game ideas yourself, I would absolutely love to hear them. Like, legitimately, I would love to hear them. The email, Darren, is
thegiftofgamingpodcast@gmail.com.
Hell yeah, thank you. Yeah, I did not prepare that.
I almost didn't remember it myself.
That's please send them in though. Please send them in. We'd love to hear about them. It would be cool if we did a Game Dreamer episode in future where we could like pick out like
little ideas that people have sent us in.
Could do a little corner for people who submitted things. Like do a little that could be so fun. Or like do an episode dedicated to them. That could be that could be awesome.
And just take them ourselves and make the games,
into money.
Make the money.
Yeah,
it'd be great.
Easy money.
Yeah.
That'd be great. So please do get in touch with your game ideas. Darren, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much. I'll shout out really quickly the Patreon.
Yeah, we're doing I haven't told you, but we're doing a post show after this real quick about our Battle Royale Season 2.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Patreon.com/The Gift of Gaming. If you want to check out that, there's just like a boatload of extra content there. There's like 60-something extra little post show episodes in there currently. So go help yourself. It's the cost of a coffee a month. You'll be helping us keep the mics on. It'd be great.
And then if you enjoyed the show, please tell one person you know about the show. That would be awesome. Rate us if you're into that kind of thing. But like, just tell one person you know about the show. Maybe share it on social media or in a WhatsApp group or something like that.
Yeah, please share it on social media because I don't have social media for this podcast at all. I hate social media. So yeah, if you can do my job for me, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, it's scary. No, we appreciate any kind of growth through just natural people interacting with the podcast. That's always really lovely to hear. And if you join up the Patreon, we will see you in the Battle Royale segment next. Always a very good time, so consider doing that. But usually, just as always, we've loved having you, the audience, here listening to our little chats. Thank you so much for joining us on the Gift of Gaming podcast. We will see you next week. I believe it's a news episode that we have next week.
Yeah. You, me, and Chris. Hopefully, we all on for some news.
Sounds good. Darren will be back in the host seat for that one, and then myself and Chris will be joining him. So please join us for that next week. Really looking forward to having you there with us. And as always, keep enjoying the gift that is gaming.
Yes, Luke. Yes.
Goodbye.